In this video, I'd like to bring 3 of my favorite Nikon f-mount lenses to your attention. It is a trio of prime lenses that delivers excellent imaging performance for an unbeatable price tag. Those 3 lenses are the 35mm f2 AF-D, the 50mm f1.4 AF-D, and currently mounted on my Nikon F5, the 85mm f1.8 AF-D. The 35mm and the 50mm were introduced in 1995. The 85mm was introduced in 1994. The optical design of all 3 lenses was based on previous successful Nikon lens designs, so they weren't designed completely from the ground up. All 3 lenses were meant to be shot in conjunction with high-end Nikon film cameras. And in the analog workflow, you cannot correct for distortion and chromatic aberration, because essentially what you captured on film is what printed on the paper. Not looking at contrast modifications and so on. Of course you could do that. So all in all, these lenses perform quite good in this perspective. However, when compared to modern lenses, it becomes apparent that when shot wide open, the micro contrast is somewhat lower. However, and this is very interesting, the images are very alive, they are full of character, and the color rendition at wide apertures is amazing. I really like that in all 3 lenses. When stopping these lenses down to f5.6, all 3 of them reach their peak performance. The sharpness and detail they deliver from f5.6 onwards is more than enough for 36 megapixel cameras. I would even say for 45 megapixel cameras. Also, when you pair these lenses with slide film, which has equally high resolution than these high megapixel cameras, they are also pretty capable of resolving that. When it comes to build quality, all 3 lenses are very similar. They all have plastic exteriors, they have a full metal mechanical construction on the inside, and they don't have an autofocus motor. Handling these lenses makes one trait of them very apparent. They are high quality lenses capable of surviving a professional's daily work routine. I've seen very banged up versions, but I've never seen one that failed due to a mechanical defect. The lack of autofocus motors inside these lenses really supports the durability aspect, because this is one component less that could potentially fail over the years. This trio of lenses marks a transitional period in Nikon lens design between manual focus lenses and the modern AFS lenses. So one trait these lenses inherited from the manual focus lenses from the past is that they don't have a bayonet lens hood but screw-in lens hoods. When it comes to compatibility, nothing comes close to these 3 Nikon AF-D lenses. And actually, that is one of the reasons why I bought these 3 lenses in the first place, because I was looking for lenses that could be used with my manual focus film bodies, also with my autofocus film bodies, and of course with all my digital bodies for my commercial work. And these 3 lenses deliver right there. Let me explain that. When mounting these AF primes on manual focus bodies. They'll essentially turn into regular manual focus Nikon prime lenses. Thanks to the aperture ring and the AIS indexing, the aperture information can be easily set and is mechanically transmitted to the Nikon film body. That works perfectly fine, and I've used these lenses in conjunction with my Nikon F3s, FM3As and so on and so forth without any issues. Mounting these lenses on newer autofocus bodies like the Nikon F5 essentially means you get all the features built into these lenses. First, of course, you get fast, reliable autofocus. Also, these lenses feature a CPU chip, and the CPU chip transmits lens and exposure aperture information right to the electronic camera body. You can decide whether you want to set the aperture via the aperture ring or with the dial controls. On the Nikon F4, which has no dial controls, you have to set the aperture via the aperture ring. There is an interesting feature. There is a small lock. You can hear it engaging and disengaging, which locks the aperture ring in place, because when you use the dial control, the apertures of these lenses have to be set to f22 in order to work. So, and to not change that during a shooting, you can simply lock it with this little switch on the lens. Also, when mounted on modern digital cameras like the Nikon D800, the Nikon D850, Nikon D5, D6 and so forth, you'll again get full compatibility. Exposure data, lens data, everything is transmitted to the digital camera and stored in the RAW file at the moment of capturing the image. Very useful. Works perfectly fine. It's a little bit of a different story when you'd like to use AF-D lenses with a Nikon Z mirrorless camera. The reason is as follows. The Nikon FTC adapter, which is required to go from the F bayonet to the C bayonet, has no built-in autofocus motor. So there is no autofocus operation on Nikon Z bodies. Also, the lenses have a very particular behavior when mounted on Z cameras. If you'll set the aperture lower than wide open, the camera stops down the lens until f5.6 for electronic preview purposes. If you'll stop the lens down even further, the camera will stop at f5.6 and only stop down in the moment of exposure. So while this works really okay in practice, I've tried that, the loss of autofocus performance is really a pity. In the last 3 years of my professional career, I've mostly shot my images with these AF-D primes. The focal length, 35mm, is very useful for reportage. 50mm, always good, especially in the studio, and occasionally I use the 85mm for portraits. What I also really liked about these lenses is their low light capability. With f2 in the 35mm and f1.4 in the 50mm, you really have lenses that work in available light condition. And the rendering of these lenses when shot wide open in low light is incredible. I really like that. The 85mm with its aperture of 1.8 is also very good for selective focusing techniques in portrait scenarios. I've mounted these lenses mostly on my Nikon D700s and Nikon D800s and always found the autofocusing performance exceptional. The lenses really acquire focus very quickly and very accurately. Also, the autofocus tracking, it works perfectly. This is quite interesting to me because the popular belief is that The AF-D lenses, which have no autofocus motor, are inferior to AF-S lenses with an integrated autofocus motor. Maybe there is a difference. I can only say that with these three lenses there is no real need to get the AF-S lenses. They just work. They just get the job done. Also, I've used these lenses with my Nikon F6 bodies for analog projects, and again the same picture. Autofocus performance is reliable on the F6 as well. It's super snappy, it's super fast. Also on bodies like the Nikon F5. In rare cases, I've used these lenses with manual focus Nikon film bodies like the F3. They work fine, but the manual focus experience is a little bit hampered by the lack of dampening in the focusing ring. So if you are only shooting manual film cameras, those are probably not the best lenses in terms of user experience that you can buy. Quite interestingly, these lenses also work very well for video, as long as you don't change the aperture during filming and as long as you don't use the autofocus. Because the autofocus noise due to the AF motor in the camera is just too loud if you're recording sound on camera directly over here, because you're gonna get all the autofocus operation noise on your footage then. Again, apart from that, you can perfectly shoot video with those lenses. You only have to focus them manually. That's all. The 35mm f2, the 50mm f1.4 and the 85mm f1.8, they really deliver. Character, optical performance, great handling, compatibility and an unbeatable price point. I'd go as far as to state that these three lenses are a real insider tip for all Nikon shooters, both digital and analog. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see sample images, click the link in the description. It will bring you to my website, to the written article, and there are some example images in there taken with these lenses. Also, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, but also following me on Instagram, because on Instagram you'll see many other shots taken with this wonderful trio of lenses.